how dire
Pleasure.
is the situation facing aviation workers and the big airlines? What will the end of JobKeeper mean for them?
Look, the situation is extremely dire, Ash. 3 out of 4 workers in the aviation industry rely on JobKeeper. Some of the numbers are really troubling. About 45% of those workers have accessed their super. 50% of them are having problems paying their mortgage. It's a very, very grave situation. And one of the things about aviation, and then by association, the tourism industry, the aviation industry is a critical economic enabler. And we in Australia, because of our vast distances, sparse population, we rely on aviation more than any other country in the world. And we have one of the best, if not the best, aviation system in the world, the safest by any measure you like. Now, what the government risks here is that fantastic aviation industry, which again is an economic enabler, being decimated by the removal of JobKeeper, and then also the fare war we're going to get from March the 1st when Rex starts flying between Sydney and Melbourne, then later on to Brisbane. It's going to be a very dire situation, and what we're faced with is losing an enormous amount of experience, pilots, engineers, management from this industry, and when we really need them as we come out of this pandemic, the airlines are not going to be able to respond the way they would have because they've lost so much in the way of experience. So it's a very, very grave situation, and the government must step in to have this aviation JobKeeper initiative that's been suggested.
And Geoff, are you hearing any rumblings that they are planning to do that, to offer that sort of targeted support to this sector? I mean, we've seen a lot of different sectors now asking for their own version of JobKeeper. There was an idea for Hospo Keeper for hospitality workers, for Touri Keeper for tourism workers. You know, we can understand that there are certain sectors that are being hit a lot worse through this pandemic, and this is certainly one of them. Are you expecting to hear something soon on this front from the government?
I believe we are, and certainly tourism as well. We're talking specifically about aviation, but tourism as well. An incredibly important industry to this country. It's put in the shade by the resources industry, if you like, and we all talk about the resources industry as being the major industry, which it is. But tourism is so important because it employs so many people, and a lot of unskilled people, a lot of students, a lot of young folks. So it's a very important industry as well. So I believe the government needs to, and I'm hearing that they are seriously considering targeting support to specific industries that need help, because we're not out of this yet by any stretch. I think they do need to step up.
Geoff, we've seen a lot of discussion lately about the efficacy of the different vaccines. In light of the doubts we're seeing raised about how certain vaccines impact certain strains of the virus, what does that mean for airlines who might be requiring vaccination certificates for their passengers? I mean, getting the jab is one thing, but actually being protected from certain strains may end up being quite another.
Look, I believe that having the jab and having a test before you fly is going to be mandatory, and so it should be. I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, and even today, there are some countries in the world you can't go to unless you've got a vaccine against very exotic diseases. But going back 30 or 40 years, when you walked onto an aeroplane, you had a passport on one hand and you had a vaccination book in the other with 5 or 6 vaccination detailed down. So, and the other issue here is certain countries like Singapore, for instance, they probably will not allow people to either enter Singapore or transit Singapore without a vaccination. So it's not really going to be up to the airlines. It's going to be up to what countries require. And I would say that most countries will require a vaccination, will require a COVID-19 test, because yes, the efficacy of some of these vaccines is now in question, particularly the South African one against certain vaccines. It's proving to be very resistant. So until we get everybody vaccinated, and we need to do that as fast as possible, so we reduce the chance of mutations, absolutely, we're going to have a vaccination before you fly, no question.